Millionaire ignores woman. Months later, she became the star the world wanted to see. Before anything else, if you're watching this from a place of struggle, know that you're not alone. Drop a heart below. The crystal chandelier cast golden shadows across Belmont's, Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, where a single meal cost more than most people made in a week. Marcus Wellington adjusted his custom Armani cufflinks as he strode through the marble-floored establishment, his Italian leather shoes clicking with the confidence of a man who owned 3 Fortune 500 companies before his 35th birthday. "Mr. Wellington, your usual table awaits," the Maitre d' said with practiced deference, leading him past tables where New York's elite discussed million-dollar deals over wine. That cost more than luxury cars. Marcus barely acknowledged the man. His steel-gray eyes scanned the room, cataloging faces, calculating net worth with the precision of a human calculator. Power was everything in his world, and tonight he was meeting Senator Davidson to discuss a real estate development that would reshape the Manhattan skyline. As he settled into his corner booth, Marcus noticed a disturbance near the kitchen entrance. A young woman in a faded blue dress was speaking earnestly with the manager, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's sophisticated hum. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes, while clean, were clearly from a discount store. "I'm sorry, miss, but you need a reservation," the manager was saying, his tone growing impatient. "Belmont's doesn't accommodate walk-ins." The woman clutched a small, worn purse to her chest. "Please, I just need to speak with someone about the waitressing position. I called 3 times, but we have no openings." The manager cut her off. "Perhaps you should try the diner down the street." Marcus watched with growing amusement as several other diners began to stare. The woman's cheeks flushed red, but she stood her ground. "I have restaurant experience," she said quietly. "I worked at Murphy's downtown for 2 years, and I really need this job. My mother is sick, and security." The manager called sharply. Marcus chuckled softly, shaking his head at the pathetic scene. When the security guard approached, the woman finally turned to leave, but not before her eyes met Marcus's across the room. For a brief moment, he saw something that surprised him, not desperation, but determination burning beneath the surface of her humiliation. As she walked past his table, Marcus couldn't resist. He leaned back in his chair, just enough to block her path, and looked up with a cold smile. "Excuse me," she said softly, trying to step around him. Marcus said loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "There's a McDonald's about 6 blocks from here. Seems more your speed." The woman stopped, her face paling. Round them, conversations quieted as other diners turned to watch the spectacle. Marcus felt the familiar rush of superiority, the intoxicating power of putting someone in their place. "I beg your pardon," she whispered. "I'm just saying, maybe aim a little lower next time. Belmont's isn't exactly looking for your type." His eyes traveled over her inexpensive clothes with obvious disdain. The woman's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "And what type would that be, sir?" Marcus's smile widened. "The type that can actually afford to eat here, for starters." A few chuckles rippled through the nearby tables. The woman's face flushed deeper, but she held his gaze for another long moment before speaking. "I'll remember that," she said quietly, her voice carrying an odd note that Marcus couldn't quite place. Then she turned and walked away, her head held high despite the whispers that followed in her wake. Marcus watched her leave, already forgetting the incident as Senator Davidson approached his table. After all, what was one insignificant woman compared to the empire he was building? But as the restaurant's doors closed behind her, Sarah Mitchell made herself a promise in the cold January air of Manhattan. She would never be invisible again. 3 weeks after the humiliation at Belmont's, Sarah Mitchell sat in the waiting room of St. Mary's Hospital, holding her mother's frail hand as machines beeped softly round them. Catherine Mitchell had been fighting lung cancer for 8 months, and the medical bills were crushing what little savings Sarah had managed to scrape together. "Sarah, honey," her mother whispered, her voice barely audible above the oxygen machine. "You don't have to stay here all day. You should be out looking for work." Sarah squeezed her mother's hand gently. "I'm not leaving you, Mom. Besides, I've been thinking about something else entirely. Catherine's tired eyes focused on her daughter's face, even weakened by illness. She could see the fire that had been building in Sarah since that terrible night at the restaurant. What kind of something else? Sarah pulled out a crumpled business card from her purse. She'd been carrying it for 2 years, ever since her college roommate Emma had given it to her. Remember Emma Rodriguez? She works for that talent agency downtown. She's been telling me for years that I should try modeling or acting. Sarah, her mother began, but Sarah cut her off gently. I know what you're thinking, but Mom, I can't keep serving tables and barely making ends meet while you're fighting for your life. I need to try something different, something bigger. Catherine studied her daughter's face. Sarah had always been beautiful, but there was something different about her now. The humiliation at Belmont's had stripped away the last of her self-doubt, leaving behind a determination that burned like steel. Your father always said you had star quality, Catherine whispered, a weak smile crossing her lips. He used to say you could light up any room you walked into. Sarah's eyes filled with tears at the mention of her father, who had died in a construction accident when she was 16. I'm going to make him proud, Mom, and I'm going to make sure you get the best treatment money can buy. The next morning, Sarah stood outside Morrison & Associates talent agency, in her best dress, the same blue one from Belmont's, now carefully mended and pressed. Emma had agreed to meet her during her lunch break, and Sarah's heart hammered as she rode the elevator to the 15th floor. Sarah, Emma Rodriguez, was a petite woman with kind eyes and an infectious smile. She hugged Sarah tightly in the sleek lobby. I can't believe you finally called. Come on, let me show you around. As they walked through the agency's modern offices, Emma explained the business. It's not easy, and it's definitely not quick. Most people think they'll be discovered overnight, but the truth is, success takes years of hard work, rejection, and constant improvement. I'm not afraid of hard work, Sarah said firmly, and I've already had my share of rejection. Emma led her to a conference room where several headshots covered one wall. These are some of our success stories, but for every one of these, there are hundreds who didn't make it. Sarah studied the photos, beautiful people who had somehow caught lightning in a bottle. What does it take? Talent, obviously. But more than that, you need something special. Something that makes people unable to look away. Emma turned to study Sarah's face. You know, you have incredible bone structure. And your eyes. There's something haunting about them. Is that good or bad? Emma smiled. In this business, haunting is very good. It means memorable. They spent the next hour discussing classes, headshots, and the brutal reality of auditions. By the time Sarah left the agency, she had signed with Emma as her agent and scheduled her first round of professional photographs. That evening, as she sat beside her mother's hospital bed, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. I met with Emma today, she told her mother, who was having a good day and seemed more alert. She thinks I have potential. Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile Sarah had seen from her in weeks. Of course you do, sweetheart. You always have. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed her mother the contact information Emma had given her for acting coaches, photographers, and casting directors. It's going to cost money we don't have, but Emma says she can work out payment plans. Sarah, her mother said softly, that man at the restaurant. What he said to you. I can see it changed something inside you. Sarah nodded slowly. He made me realize that I've been living small, playing it safe. But you know what, Mom? Maybe it's time I stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. Catherine reached over and touched her daughter's cheek. That's my girl. Your father would be so proud. As Sarah walked home through the February snow, she thought about Marcus Wellington's cruel words. He had meant to diminish her, to make her feel worthless and invisible. Instead, he had awakened something powerful that had been sleeping inside her for too long. She would never thank him for that night, but she would use it. Every acting class, every audition, every rejection would be fuel for the fire he had accidentally lit. The transformation had begun. By March, Sarah's life had become a carefully choreographed dance between hospital visits and her new pursuit. She had moved out of her small apartment and into an even smaller studio. to save money for acting classes, headshots, and her mother's mounting medical bills. Emma had introduced her to Mikhail Volkov, a Russian acting coach whose tiny studio above a Ukrainian restaurant had produced 3 Emmy winners and countless working actors. Mikhail was a small, intense man with piercing blue eyes who spoke in accented English, peppered with philosophical observations about the human condition. "You are pretty girl," he told Sarah during their first session, "but pretty girls are everywhere in New York. What makes you different?" Sarah had expected this question, but when faced with Mikhail's unwavering stare, her prepared answer seemed inadequate. I work hard. I'm determined." Mikhail waved dismissively. "Everyone works hard. Everyone is determined." "What is your pain, Sarah Mitchell? What is the thing that makes you understand suffering?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Sarah thought of her mother's labored breathing, of her father's empty chair at the dinner table, of Marcus Wellington's cold laughter echoing through Belmont's elegant dining room. "I understand what it feels like to be invisible," she said quietly. "To have people look right through you like you don't matter." For the first time, Mikhail smiled. "Good. This is useful. Now, show me." The next 3 hours were unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Mikhail pushed her through exercises that stripped away every defense she had built around her. Emotions. By the end of the session, she was emotionally raw but somehow more alive than she had felt in years. "You have talent," Mikhail said as she gathered her things. "But more important, you have truth. Come back tomorrow." Meanwhile, Emma was working her contacts to get Sarah auditions. The first few were disasters. Sarah was too nervous, too eager, too desperate for approval. But with each rejection, something hardened inside her. "You're improving," Emma told her after a particularly brutal callback for a soap opera. "I can see it in your walk. The way you hold yourself. You're starting to believe you belong in those rooms." Sarah's first breakthrough came in April during an audition for a small independent film. The role was tiny, 3 lines as a waitress, but the director, a young woman named Jessica Chen, saw something special. "You have this quality," Jessica told her after the audition. "It's like you're holding back an ocean behind your eyes. I want to see what happens when you let it out." Sarah got the part, and though it paid almost nothing, being on set was a revelation. She watched the other actors work, studied how they found truth in the scripted words, and began to understand that acting wasn't about pretending to be someone else. It was about finding the places where you connected with the character. During breaks, she would call her mother from the hospital payphone to describe everything: the cameras, the lights, the way the director guided them through each scene. "You sound different," Catherine observed one evening. Sarah had just finished a particularly good day on set, and her excitement was infectious even through the phone. "Stronger. I feel stronger, Mom. Like I'm finally becoming who I was meant to be." But the real change came when Sarah began working with a vocal coach named Patricia Williams, a former Broadway singer who specialized in helping actors find their authentic voice. Patricia was a no-nonsense African-American woman in her 60s who had worked with some of the biggest names in entertainment. "Honey," Patricia told her during their first session, "you're speaking from your throat, not your soul. Everything about you is apologetic. You take up space like you're sorry for existing." Over the following weeks, Patricia worked with Sarah to find her full voice, not just vocally, but physically and emotionally. She taught her to stand taller, to make eye contact without flinching, to speak her truth without apology. "Your voice is your power," Patricia explained. "Every great performer understands this. Maya Angelou knew it. Oprah knows it. When you speak, you need to fill the room, not shrink from it." The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Emma noticed it first during a meeting in early May. "Sarah, you look different, not just your appearance, but the way you carry yourself." Sarah had been wondering about this herself. When she looked in the mirror now, she saw someone she was beginning to recognize, not the invisible waitress who had been humiliated at Belmont's, but someone confident, purposeful, magnetic. "I'm learning to take up space," Sarah said simply. Emma smiled. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I've got you an audition next week for a national commercial, and I think you might actually book this one." As Sarah left the agency that day, she caught her reflection in the building's glass doors. The woman looking back at her was beautiful, but more than that, she looked like someone who mattered, someone who had stories to tell and the courage to tell them. For the first time since that awful night in January, Sarah smiled thinking about Marcus Wellington, not because she forgave him, but because she was beginning to understand that his cruelty had been the catalyst for something extraordinary. The invisible woman was disappearing, and in her place, a star was being born. The national commercial audition in May turned out to be for a luxury skincare brand that was launching a campaign about real beauty. Sarah walked into the waiting room filled with dozens of stunning women, each one looking like they belonged on magazine covers. For a moment, the old Sarah threatened to surface, the one who would have apologized for taking up space, who would have shrunk into herself among such obvious competition. But then she remembered Patricia's words about filling the room, and she straightened her shoulders. Sarah Mitchell, the casting director, a stylish woman named Lauren Hayes, appeared with a clipboard. "We're ready for you," in the audition room. Sarah faced a panel of her executives and a camera. The brief was simple. Talk about a moment when you felt beautiful, not because of how you looked, but because of who you were. Sarah took a breath and thought about the past for months, about finding her voice with Patricia, about making her mother smile during difficult treatments, about the way she felt when she nailed a scene in acting class. "Beauty isn't something you wear," she began, her voice clear and strong. "It's something you discover when you stop apologizing for existing. I used to think I was invisible, but I've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to disappear." The room fell silent. Lauren Hayes leaned forward, studying Sarah's face. "Can you give us that again? But this time, tell us about a specific moment." Sarah thought of her mother, who despite her illness, had insisted on watching Sarah's first short film from her hospital bed. "My mother is fighting cancer," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion. "Last week, she was having a really bad day, couldn't keep food down, could barely lift her head. But when she saw me on screen for the first time, she sat up and said, 'There's my star.' In that moment, I felt beautiful because I was being exactly who I was meant to be." 3 days later, Emma called with the news. Sarah had booked a commercial, which would air nationally and pay more than she had made in the previous 6 months combined. "This is it, Sarah," Emma said excitedly. "This is your moment. The client loved you so much they want to make you the face of their entire campaign." The commercial shoot was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Professional makeup artists, wardrobe stylists, and a crew of 30 people all focused on capturing her authentic beauty. The director, Marcus Torres, not to be confused with Marcus Wellington, was a gentleman who specialized in finding natural moments. "Don't perform," he told her between takes. "Just be." The camera loves honesty. When the commercial aired in July, Sarah's life changed overnight. The campaign's tagline became "Beauty Unafraid," and Sarah's face was suddenly on billboards, in magazines, and on social media across the country. Her Instagram followers jumped from 300 to 30,000 in a week. But more importantly, the commercial opened doors she hadn't even known existed. Emma's phone started ringing with audition requests for television shows, films, and modeling opportunities. "I've never seen anything like this," Emma told her over lunch. "Usually, it takes years to build this kind of momentum. You're becoming what we call undeniable." Sarah's first major television audition was for a recurring role on a popular drama series. The character was a young doctor who had overcome a difficult childhood to become successful. When Sarah read the script, she felt like the role had been written specifically for her. The audition was at a major network's offices in Manhattan. As Sarah sat in the waiting room, she noticed several other actresses she recognized from magazine covers and smaller TV shows. A year ago, she would have been intimidated. Now, she simply prepared her scenes and waited for her name to be called. Sarah Mitchell. The casting room was larger than any she had been in before. Behind a long table sat 5 people, including the show's creator, executive producer, and network executives. Sarah introduced herself confidently and began her first scene. "Stop," the creator said after only 30 seconds. Sarah's heart sank, thinking she had made a mistake. "I'm sorry, but could you do that again? This time don't act it, just live it." Sarah nodded and found the truth in the character's words about overcoming obstacles. When she finished the scene, the room was quiet for a long moment. "We'd like you to read with our male lead," the executive producer said. "He's here today for chemistry reads." For the next hour, Sarah worked opposite the show's star, a well-known actor named Jake Morrison. The chemistry was undeniable, and by the time they finished the last scene, Sarah could see the excitement in the executives' faces. 2 days later, Emma called with life-changing news. "You got it. 3-episode arc, with potential to become a series regular. Sarah, this is huge." As Sarah hung up the phone, she thought about calling someone to share the news. Her mother was having a good week and would want to hear every detail. Emma was already planning their next moves. But for just a moment, Sarah allowed herself to remember the woman who had walked out of Belmont's 6 months ago. Humiliated and invisible, that woman would never recognize who Sarah was becoming. The transformation that had begun with Marcus Wellington's cruelty was turning into something extraordinary. Sarah was no longer just surviving, she was becoming undeniable. And this was only the beginning. By October, Sarah's recurring role on City General had turned into a series regular position, and her character, Dr. Elena Vasquez, had become a fan favorite. The show's ratings spiked whenever Sarah appeared on screen, and entertainment blogs started calling her the breakout star of the season. But it was her appearance on The Tonight Show that truly launched her into stardom. Host Jimmy Fallon had invited her on to talk about her journey from unknown to television star. And Sarah's authentic, relatable storytelling captivated both the studio audience and millions of viewers at home. "So, Sarah," Jimmy said, leaning forward with genuine interest, "6 months ago, you were completely unknown. Now you're one of the most talked about actresses in America. What's that like?" Sarah smiled, more comfortable in front of cameras now than she had ever been. "You know, Jimmy, I think we all have moments that change us completely. Sometimes those moments come from kindness, and sometimes they come from cruelty. The key is what you choose to do with them." "That sounds like there's a story there." "There is," Sarah said, her voice carrying the confidence Patricia had helped her find earlier this year. "Someone tried to make me feel invisible, like I didn't matter. Instead of letting that destroy me, I decided to become impossible to ignore." The interview clip went viral within hours. #BuchanAfraid and #impossible to ignore became trending hashtags, and Sarah's social media following exploded to over 2 million overnight. Emma was fielding offers from major film studios, fashion brands, and publishers who wanted Sarah to write a book about her transformation. "You're becoming more than an actress," Emma told her during a strategy meeting. "You're becoming a symbol." Meanwhile, Sarah's mother was responding well to a new treatment protocol that Sarah could finally afford. Catherine had moved to a private facility with better care, and for the first time in months, her doctors were cautiously optimistic. "I'm so proud of you," Catherine told Sarah during one of their daily visits. "Not because you're famous, but because you found yourself." Sarah's newfound fame brought unexpected challenges. Paparazzi followed her everywhere, and tabloids analyzed her every appearance. But she handled the pressure with grace, always remembering Patricia's lessons about owning her space and speaking her truth. The pinnacle came in December when Sarah was chosen to present at the Golden Globe Awards. Standing on that stage in a stunning red gown, addressing a room full of Hollywood's biggest stars, Sarah felt the full magnitude of her transformation. "Art has the power to make the invisible visible," she said, presenting the award for Best Supporting Actor. "It reminds us that everyone has a story worth telling, and everyone deserves to be seen." As applause filled the ballroom, Sarah caught sight of herself on the massive screens round the room. The woman looking back at her was confident, radiant, and powerful, everything the humiliated waitress from Belmont's had dreamed of becoming. After the ceremony, at the exclusive after-party, Sarah found herself surrounded by A-list actors, directors, and producers who wanted to work with her. Offers were whispered in her ear between congratulations, and she realized that she had truly arrived. But the most satisfying moment came when a young woman approached her near the end of the evening. She was clearly working the event, probably a server or assistant, and she looked nervous. As she approached, Ms. Mitchell, the young woman said quietly, "I just wanted to thank you. I saw your Tonight Show interview, and, well, it made me realize I don't have to stay invisible either." Sarah smiled and took the woman's hand. "You were never invisible. You just needed to see yourself clearly." As Sarah left the party that night, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 12 months ago, she had been a struggling waitress, ignored and dismissed. Now, she was being called one of the most promising new stars in Hollywood. But more than fame or money, Sarah had found something invaluable: herself. She had learned to take up space without apology, to speak her truth without fear, and to transform pain into power. The girl who had been humiliated at Belmont's was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who was truly impossible to ignore, and somewhere in Manhattan, Marcus Wellington was about to discover just how impossible to ignore she had become. January 2020 marked exactly 1 year since Sarah's humiliation at Belmont's, and the irony wasn't lost on her as she sat in the back of a black SUV, heading to that very restaurant. Vanity Fair was doing a cover story about her remarkable rise, and they wanted to photograph her at the place where her transformation had begun. Sarah was now one of the most recognizable faces in America. Her Golden Globe presentation had led to 3 major film offers, a fashion campaign with Chanel, and a book deal worth 7 figures. More importantly, her mother's cancer was in remission, and Catherine had been able to move into a beautiful apartment overlooking Central Park. As the SUV pulled up to Belmont's, Sarah saw the crowd of photographers already gathered. The restaurant's manager, the same one who had dismissed her a year ago, was waiting at the entrance. With an eager smile, "Ms. Mitchell, welcome back to Belmont's," he gushed, not a trace of recognition in his eyes. "We're so honored to have you here." Sarah smiled graciously, remembering Patricia's lessons about maintaining dignity in all circumstances. "Thank you. I believe this is where my story really began." Inside, the restaurant was exactly as she remembered, but everything had changed. Now, conversations stopped when she entered. Now, people stared not with dismissal, but with admiration and curiosity. The photographer, a renowned artist named Vincent Chen, had set up elaborate lighting near the same corner booth where Marcus Wellington had sat that awful night. "Sarah, I want to capture the contrast," Vincent explained. "The beauty that was always there, but now unveiled." As the shoot progressed, Sarah found herself thinking about that January night. She remembered the burning humiliation, the way the other diners had laughed, the cold superiority in Marcus's voice when he had suggested she try McDonald's instead. "Can you give me something more contemplative?" Vincent called out. "Like you're remembering something important." Sarah let her mind wander to the moment when Marcus had looked at her with such disdain, when he had tried to make her feel worthless and invisible. She thought about the promise she had made to herself on the cold street outside, that she would never be invisible again. She had kept that promise, and so much more. "Perfect," Vincent said, the camera clicking rapidly. "That's exactly what I needed." After the shoot, Sarah sat alone at the bar, waiting for her interview with the Vanity Fair journalist. The restaurant was quieter now, between lunch and dinner service, and she allowed herself a moment to absorb the magnitude of her transformation. "Excuse me," a man's voice said behind her. "Aren't you Sarah Mitchell?" Sarah turned around and felt her heart stop. Standing there, looking older and somehow smaller than she remembered, was Marcus Wellington. He was still handsome, still expensively dressed, but there was something different about him, something almost desperate in his eyes. "Yes," she said simply, her voice steady despite the shock. Marcus smiled, the same charming expression he probably used to get everything he wanted. "I'm Marcus Wellington. I wanted to introduce myself because, well, you're absolutely stunning, and I'd love to take you to dinner sometime." Sarah studied his face carefully. There was no recognition there, no memory of the woman he had humiliated. In this very spot 1 year ago, to him, she was just another beautiful actress he wanted to add to his collection. "That's very kind of you," Sarah said, her voice carrying a note of amusement that Marcus missed entirely. "I know this might sound Presumptuous, Marcus continued, moving closer. But I think we'd have a lot in common. I'm successful. You're successful. We move in the same circles now. The same circles. Sarah repeated softly, exactly. I mean, look at you now. Sitting here at Belmont's like you belong here. You've certainly come a long way. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. But not because they hurt, because they revealed everything she needed to know about Marcus Wellington. He was still the same man who measured worth by wealth, who believed that belonging somewhere was about money rather than character. Yes, Sarah said, standing slowly. I certainly have come a long way. Marcus pulled out his phone. So, can I get your number? Sarah looked at him for a long moment. This man who had tried to break her spirit and had instead forged her into steel. She thought about telling him who she was, about watching recognition dawn in his eyes, but she realized that would give him too much power, too much importance in her story. Actually, she said with a gentle smile, I don't think we're quite as compatible as you imagine. Come on. Marcus pressed, his charm taking on a slightly aggressive edge. I'm offering you a chance here. Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are, Sarah said quietly. And for the first time, Marcus Wellington heard something in her voice that made him pause, something that suggested this beautiful woman knew something he didn't, something that made his confident smile falter just slightly. But before he could respond, the Vanity Fair journalist approached for the interview, and Sarah walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone at the bar with his phone still in his hand, and the growing uncomfortable feeling that he had just made a terrible mistake. What Marcus didn't know was that his mistake had been made a year ago, and Sarah Mitchell, the woman he had tried to render invisible, was now impossible to ignore by the entire world. The transformation was complete. Now, it was time for the reckoning. Marcus Wellington couldn't shake the encounter at Belmont's. For 3 weeks, Sarah Mitchell haunted his thoughts in a way no woman ever had. He found himself watching her interviews online, studying her photographs in magazines, and growing increasingly frustrated by her rejection. I don't understand it, he told his assistant, Jennifer, as they reviewed contracts in his penthouse office overlooking Manhattan. I offered her everything: dinner at the finest restaurants, access to exclusive events, my connections. What more could she want? Jennifer, a sharp woman in her 40s who had worked for Marcus for 6 years, looked up from her laptop. Maybe she just wasn't interested. Mr. Wellington, that's impossible, Marcus said, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows. She's an actress. I could finance her films, introduce her to studio heads. I could make her career. What Marcus couldn't comprehend was that Sarah's career was already soaring without his help. Her latest film, an independent drama called Rising Tide, had premiered at Sundance to standing ovations and was being called a masterpiece. Sarah's performance as a woman overcoming domestic violence was generating serious Oscar buzz. Marcus's obsession deepened when he attended a charity gala where Sarah was the keynote speaker. She stood at the podium in an elegant black gown, speaking about her foundation for cancer research, a cause clearly close to her heart. Strength isn't about never falling down, Sarah said, her voice carrying across the ballroom filled with New York's elite. It's about getting back up every time someone tries to make you believe you don't deserve to stand. The audience gave her a thunderous ovation, but Marcus barely heard the applause. He was mesmerized by her presence, her confidence, the way she commanded the room with such grace and power. This wasn't just beauty, this was magnificence. After the speech, Marcus approached her at the reception, determined to try again. Ms. Mitchell, he said, intercepting her path to the exit. Remarkable speech tonight. Sarah looked at him with those intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. Thank you, Mr. Wellington. You remembered my name, Marcus said, flashing his most charming smile. I'm flattered. I remember many things, Sarah replied quietly. Then perhaps you'll remember my dinner invitation. I've been thinking about you constantly since Belmont's. Sarah tilted her head slightly, studying his face. Have you? And what exactly have you been thinking? Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice to what he imagined was an irresistible tone. I've been thinking that you and I could be extraordinary together. I have influence, connections, The kind of power that could take your career to levels you've never imagined. My career is doing quite well on its own, Sarah said mildly. But imagine what it could become with the right partner. I could open doors that are still closed to you. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. You seem very confident about what I need, Mr. Wellington. Tell me, what makes you think I'm lacking anything? The question caught Marcus off guard. He was used to women, being impressed by his wealth and status, grateful for his attention. Sarah's calm confidence was unlike anything he'd encountered. I'm not saying you're lacking anything, he backtracked. I'm saying we could enhance each other's lives. Beautiful. Successful people belong together. Belong together, Sarah repeated. Slowly, based on what criteria exactly? Marcus felt like he was losing control of the conversation. But he pressed on, based on the fact that we're both at the top of our respective fields. We move in the same circles. We understand success. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus thought he might finally be getting through to her. Then she smiled, not warmly, but with something that looked almost like pity. Mr. Wellington, I think you have a fundamental misunderstanding about what makes people compatible. Then educate me, Marcus said, his patience beginning to fray. Compatibility isn't about wealth or status or moving in the same circles. It's about values, kindness, the ability to see people for who they really are rather than what they can do for you. The words stung more than Marcus cared to admit. And you think I can't see you for who you really are? Sarah's smile grew sadder. I think you see a beautiful, successful actress who would look good on your arm and enhance your image. But you don't see me at all. With that, she walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone in the middle of the glittering reception, feeling more frustrated and confused than ever. As he watched her leave, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He would find out everything there was to know about Sarah Mitchell. Her background, her history, her weaknesses. Everyone had a price, and he would find hers. What Marcus didn't realize was that in trying to uncover Sarah's secrets, he was about to discover a truth that would shatter his understanding of everything. While Marcus Wellington was plotting to unravel her past, Sarah Mitchell was living fully in her present. Her latest film was generating awards season buzz. Her mother's health continued to improve, and for the first time in her life, Sarah felt truly content with who she had become. It was during a quiet Saturday morning in March that fate introduced her to David Chen, a man who would change her understanding of love completely. Sarah had developed a routine of visiting the farmers' market in Union Square every weekend, a small piece of normalcy in her increasingly public life. She wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, trying to blend in as she selected fresh flowers for her mother's apartment. Excuse me, a gentle voice said behind her. You dropped this. Sarah turned to see a man holding her wallet, which had apparently fallen from her purse. He was tall with kind brown eyes, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. There was something immediately calming about his presence. Thank you so much, Sarah said, pulling off her sunglasses to look at him properly. I would have been in real trouble. Without this, David's eyes widened slightly with recognition. But instead of the usual excitement or calculation Sarah had grown accustomed to, she saw something different, genuine warmth and a hint of shyness. You're Sarah Mitchell, he said simply. My students are going to flip when I tell them I met you. Students? I teach 4th grade at PS 89 in Brooklyn. They're all obsessed with that movie you did last year. Well, the age-appropriate parts. Anyway, Sarah found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. You're a teacher. Guilty as charged. Though I promise I'm more exciting than I sound. David's self-deprecating humor was refreshing after the aggressive confidence she usually encountered. I doubt that, Sarah said, then realized how that sounded. I mean, I'm sure you're plenty exciting. Teaching is amazing. I wanted to be a teacher once before you became a movie star, David suggested gently. Before I learned I had other talents, Sarah corrected. But I still think teaching might be the most important job in the world. They ended up walking through the market together, David carrying her bags as Sarah selected vegetables and flowers. Their conversation flowed effortlessly about books, about his students, about her foundation work, about everything except her fame. I have to ask, David said as they reached the end of the market. "Why are you shopping here by yourself? Don't. Movie stars have people for this," Sarah laughed. "I like doing normal things. They keep me grounded. Besides, how else would I meet interesting teachers? Was that flirting?" David asked with mock seriousness. "Because I should warn you, I'm terribly out of practice. It was definitely flirting," Sarah confirmed. "And you're doing fine." David looked at her for a moment, and Sarah saw him make a decision. "Would you maybe want to get coffee? There's a great little place around the corner that makes terrible coffee, but excellent conversation." Sarah didn't hesitate. "I'd love that." They spent the next 3 hours in a tiny cafe, talking about everything and nothing. David told her about his students, about the book he was slowly writing, about his dream of starting a literacy program for underprivileged kids. Sarah found herself sharing things she rarely discussed: her father's death, her mother's illness, her fears about fame changing her. "Can I ask you something?" David said as they prepared to leave. "What's it like, going from unknown to famous so quickly?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "It's like suddenly everyone knows your name, but no one knows who you are, except..." She paused, looking at him. "You seem to see me. That's because you're letting me." David said simply, "Most people wear masks. You took yours off when they parted ways." David didn't ask for her number. Instead, he said, "I'll be here next Saturday if you want to continue this conversation." As Sarah walked home, she realized something profound had happened. For 3 hours, she hadn't been Sarah Mitchell the actress or Sarah Mitchell the rising star. She had just been Sarah, talking to David about life and dreams and the things that really mattered. That night, she called her mother to tell her about the encounter. "He sounds wonderful," Catherine said. "What does he do again?" "He teaches 4th grade," Sarah said, smiling at the memory of David's easy laugh. "A teacher," Catherine mused. "Your father would have liked that. He always said the best people were the ones who dedicated their lives to helping others." "Mom, is it crazy that I'm more excited about coffee with a school teacher than I was about meeting Steven Spielberg last month?" Catherine's laugh was warm and knowing. "Sweetheart, that's not crazy at all. That's your heart telling you what really matters." As Sarah hung up the phone, she found herself counting the days until Saturday. For the first time since her transformation began, she was looking forward to being ordinary. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus Wellington was meeting with a private investigator, determined to find anything he could use to win Sarah Mitchell's attention. He had no idea that while he was digging into her past, Sarah was already moving toward a future that had nothing to do with wealth, status, or the kind of man Marcus Wellington represented. Marcus Wellington stared at the investigator's report in disbelief, reading it for the 3rd time in his Park Avenue office. The manila folder contained photographs, employment records, and a detailed timeline that made his blood run cold. "This can't be right," he said to the investigator, a thin man named Robert Hayes, who specialized in background checks for high-net-worth individuals. "I triple-checked everything, Mr. Wellington. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, born in Queens, worked various service jobs before her acting career took off. The photograph from Belmont's security footage is quite clear." Marcus looked at the grainy image. Hayes had somehow obtained Sarah in that faded blue dress, standing near the kitchen entrance, looking exactly like the woman he had humiliated 15 months ago. The woman he had dismissed as worthless, suggested should try McDonald's instead. "You're telling me," Marcus said slowly, "that Sarah Mitchell, the actress who's been nominated for a Golden Globe and is being called the next Meryl Streep, is the same woman who was looking for a waitressing job at Belmont's?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Hayes confirmed. "The transformation is remarkable, but the facial recognition software confirmed it. Same bone structure, same eyes. The DNA would match if you could get a sample." Marcus felt sick, not because he had been cruel to someone who later became famous. That would have been bad enough, but because Sarah had recognized him. Every interaction they'd had since that night suddenly took on new meaning. Her strange responses at Belmont's when he'd introduced himself, her comment about knowing exactly who he was, the way she'd looked at him with what he'd mistaken for attraction, but now realized was something far more complex. "Sir?" Hayes was looking at him with concern. "Are you all right?" Marcus wasn't all right. He was remembering every detail of that January night, his cruel laughter, the way he'd deliberately blocked her path, the satisfaction he'd felt at her humiliation. And Sarah had sat through his dinner invitations, his boasting about what he could do for her career, his condescending remarks about them belonging together. She had known all along, and she had handled it with a grace that made his behavior look even more monstrous by comparison. Did she ever respond to what happened that night? Publicly, I mean, Marcus asked. Hayes shook his head. I found no public statements about the incident, but her interviews often reference a moment of cruelty that motivated her transformation. She never names names. Marcus closed the folder and dismissed Hayes, needing to be alone with this revelation. He stood at his windows overlooking Central Park, trying to process what he'd learned. Sarah Mitchell hadn't just rejected him, she had rejected the man who had tried to destroy her spirit. And she had done it without exposing him, without using her platform for revenge. She had simply said no and walked away. The magnitude of his miscalculation was staggering. He had spent weeks obsessing over a woman whose rise to stardom he had inadvertently triggered through his own cruelty. Every success she achieved was a testament to her strength and his failure as a human being. Marcus thought about calling her, about trying to apologize, but what could he possibly say? Sorry for being a monster, but now that you're famous, I'd like another chance. The very idea made him feel sick. Over the following days, Marcus found himself watching Sarah's interviews with new understanding. When she talked about strength coming from adversity, he knew she was talking about him. When she mentioned learning to see her own worth despite others' cruelty, he was the cruel one she referenced. The worst part was seeing how genuinely good she had become. Her charity work, her kindness to fans, the way she used her platform to lift others up, everything about her was the opposite of what he represented. Marcus tried to focus on work, but concentration was impossible. His assistant Jennifer noticed his distraction during an important board meeting. Sir, the Henderson contract needs your attention, she whispered as he stared blankly at the conference table. What? Yes, of course. Marcus forced himself to focus, but his mind kept drifting to Sarah's words. You seem very confident about what I need. Mr. Wellington, what makes you think I'm lacking anything? She had been toying with him. He realized now, giving him every opportunity to recognize her, to apologize, to show some growth. Instead, he had doubled down on his arrogance, proving that he hadn't changed at all. That evening, Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He looked at himself honestly in the mirror. What he saw was a man who measured worth by wealth, who treated people as accessories to his success, who had been so blinded by privilege that he'd crushed someone's spirit for entertainment. Sarah Mitchell had transformed herself from invisible to undeniable. But what about Marcus Wellington? What had he become in the same time frame? He was still the same cruel man who found amusement in others' humiliation. Still the same person who believed money could buy anything, including forgiveness for unforgivable behavior. For the first time in his life, Marcus Wellington felt genuine shame. And for the first time, he understood that there were some things his wealth couldn't fix, some doors his influence couldn't open, and some women who were truly, completely beyond his reach. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just out of his league, she was playing an entirely different game. One where character mattered more than cash, where kindness trumped connections, and where he would never, ever belong. Marcus's shame transformed into desperate obsession over the following weeks. Unable to accept that Sarah was beyond his reach, he convinced himself that if he could just find the right approach, the right gesture, he could somehow earn her forgiveness and win her affection. He started small anonymous donations to Sarah's Cancer Research Foundation, flowers sent to her film sets without cards, charitable contributions made in her name. When these gestures went unacknowledged, Marcus escalated. I want to finance her next film, Marcus told his business manager, David Rothschild, during a meeting in April. Whatever project she's considering, I want to back it. David, a pragmatic man who had managed Marcus's investments for a decade, looked concerned. Marcus, you don't know anything about film production, and frankly, this level of interest in one actress is unusual for you. I'm diversifying my portfolio, Marcus said defensively. Entertainment is a growth industry, but Marcus's actions were becoming increasingly irrational. He attended every public event where Sarah might appear, always positioning himself where she couldn't miss seeing him. He researched her favorite restaurants, her mother's hospital, even the route she took for her morning runs in Central Park. The breaking point came at the Metropolitan Museum's annual gala in May. Sarah was there as a presenter, stunning in an emerald green gown that made her look like a goddess. Marcus had paid an astronomical amount to be seated at a table with a clear view of hers. During the cocktail hour, Marcus approached Sarah's table when she stepped away momentarily. He struck up a conversation with her date, a man Marcus didn't recognize, but who seemed surprisingly ordinary. "I don't believe we've met," Marcus said to David Chen, extending his hand with forced friendliness. "Marcus Wellington." "David Chen." The teacher replied with a warm smile. "Great to meet you." "How do you know Sarah?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his tone casual. "We're dating," David said simply, his face lighting up when he mentioned her. "Have been for about 2 months now. She's incredible." Marcus felt his world tilt. "Dating? Seriously?" David looked puzzled by Marcus's reaction. "Yes, seriously. Is that surprising somehow?" Before Marcus could respond, Sarah returned to the table. When she saw Marcus talking to David, her expression shifted to something between wariness and annoyance. "Mr. Wellington," she said coolly, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Sarah, darling," Marcus said, forcing his most charming smile. "I was just getting to know David." Interesting choice in companions. The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. David looked confused, but Sarah's eyes flashed with warning. "David is wonderful company," she said firmly. "He's kind, intelligent, and genuine, qualities I value highly." "Of course," Marcus said, his composure beginning to crack. "Though I have to wonder what a school teacher could possibly offer someone of your caliber." The insult hung in the air like poison. David's face reddened, but before he could respond, Sarah stood up, her voice carrying across nearby tables. "Mr. Wellington, I think you should leave our table now." "Sarah, I'm only suggesting that you could do better," Marcus said, his desperation making him reckless. "I could give you everything: luxury, influence, a lifestyle worthy of who you've become." "And what exactly do you think I've become?" Sarah asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "A star. Someone who belongs with other successful people, not." Marcus gestured dismissively at David, "A nobody from Brooklyn." The words were barely out of his mouth before Sarah stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "Let me be very clear, Mr. Wellington. I know exactly who you are and what you represent, and I would rather spend one evening with David than a lifetime with someone like you." Marcus felt his careful facade crumbling. "You can't be serious. After everything I've offered you, you've offered me nothing but your own ego and bank account." Sarah cut him off. "David offers me respect, laughter, and love. Things you wouldn't recognize if they came with a price tag. You're making a mistake," Marcus said, his voice rising. "You think the school teacher can give you the life you deserve?" "He gives me the life I want," Sarah said firmly. "And more importantly, he sees me as a person, not a trophy." With that, Sarah took David's arm and led him away from the table, leaving Marcus standing alone among the city's elite, finally understanding that his wealth meant nothing to the one woman he truly wanted. As he watched them leave together, David's protective arm round Sarah's waist, her head resting briefly on his shoulder, Marcus realized he had lost more than just a woman. He had lost his last chance at redemption. Sarah Mitchell had chosen love over luxury, kindness over wealth, substance over status. And in doing so, she had proven that Marcus Wellington, for all his money and influence, was exactly what she had always known him to be, a man with nothing real to offer. The months following the Met Gala disaster marked the deepest period of Marcus Wellington's life. His obsession with Sarah had become consuming, but watching her happiness with David Chen was torture. Every paparazzi photo of them together, laughing at dinner, walking hand in hand through Central Park, attending off-Broadway shows felt like a personal attack. Marcus's behavior became increasingly erratic. His business suffered as he spent hours scrolling through Sarah's social media, analyzing every post for signs that her relationship might be failing. His assistant Jennifer finally confronted him in September. "Mr. Wellington, you missed the Berkshire acquisition meeting. Again, the partners are concerned about your distraction." Marcus barely looked up from his computer, where he was watching an interview Sarah had given about her upcoming film. "Reschedule it. Sir, this is the third time this month, and frankly, your friends are starting to talk. This fixation on Ms. Mitchell is becoming public knowledge." The words hit Marcus like cold water. His reputation, something he had always carefully guarded, was being damaged by his pursuit of a woman who would never want him. Meanwhile, Sarah and David's relationship was deepening in ways that would have been impossible for Marcus to understand. While he was plotting grand gestures and expensive gifts, David was learning Sarah's coffee order, remembering her mother's appointment dates, and reading the books she mentioned loving. Their relationship reached a turning point during a quiet evening in October. Sarah was in David's modest Brooklyn apartment, grading papers with him while she ran lines for her next film. "You know what I love about this?" Sarah said, looking up from her script. "The romantic tension between a history teacher and a famous actress?" David asked with a grin. "The normal part. The way you make me feel like just Sarah." David set down his red pen and looked at her seriously. "You are just Sarah. The fame, the movies, the red carpets, that's what you do, not who you are." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. In all the months of her rising fame, no one had understood this distinction. "How did you know that's what I needed to hear?" "Because I've been watching you carry the weight of being Sarah Mitchell, the star, on your shoulders. You light up when you're just being yourself." That night, for the first time since her transformation began, Sarah felt completely at peace. She wasn't performing, wasn't being photographed, wasn't representing anything except her own heart. "David," she said as they sat on his couch, her head on his shoulder, "I think I'm falling in love with you." "Only thinking?" he asked softly. "Because I know I'm falling in love with you. Not the actress, not the celebrity, just you." Their first "I love you" was said quietly in a teacher's apartment in Brooklyn, with no cameras or witnesses. It was perfect. But Marcus Wellington wasn't ready to give up. In November, he made his most desperate play yet. Through his connections, Marcus discovered that David's school was facing budget cuts that would eliminate several teaching positions, including David's literacy program. Marcus saw an opportunity and acted swiftly. He arranged to meet with the school's principal, offering a massive donation that would save all the jobs and fund David's program for 5 years. The only condition was that David had to personally thank Marcus at a public ceremony. When David learned about the donation, he was torn. His students needed the money, but something about the timing and conditions felt wrong. "It's too much of a coincidence," Sarah said when David told her about the offer. "He's trying to buy his way into our lives. But the kids, Sarah, these programs could change their lives." Sarah took David's hands. "And that's exactly why he chose this approach. He knows you're too good a person to let children suffer for your pride." David struggled with the decision for days. Finally, he called Marcus directly. "Mr. Wellington, this is David Chen. I want to talk about your donation." "David, I'm so glad you called. This program of yours sounds wonderful. I'd love to help." "Cut the act," David said firmly. "We both know this has nothing to do with education and everything to do with Sarah. So let me be clear. I appreciate the gesture, but we'll find another way to fund the program." Marcus was stunned. "You're turning down money that could help hundreds of children because of your pride?" "I'm turning it down because I won't let you use children as weapons in whatever game you're playing with Sarah." "This isn't a game," Marcus snapped. "I love her." "No," David said quietly. "You're obsessed with her. There's a difference. Love means wanting someone to be happy, even if it's not with you. You want to possess her." David hung up, leaving Marcus alone with the truth he couldn't accept. 2 weeks later, Sarah learned that David had turned down the donation. When she confronted him about it, his explanation made her love him even more. "I couldn't let him think he could buy us," David said. "Simply, some things aren't for sale." That night, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that David Chen was the man she wanted to spend her life with. Not because he could give her wealth or status, but because he saw her heart and protected it with his own on a crisp December morning. In 2022, Sarah Mitchell became Sarah Chen in a small ceremony in Central Park, surrounded by only their closest family and friends. Catherine Mitchell, now 5 years cancer-free, walked her daughter down the aisle with tears of joy streaming down her face. The wedding was intentionally intimate. No paparazzi, no celebrity guests, no magazine exclusives, just love witnessed by the people who mattered most. "You look radiant," Catherine whispered as they reached the altar where David waited in a simple black suit, his face glowing with happiness. Sarah wore her grandmother's pearl necklace and a flowing white dress that cost less than some of her red carpet shoes. She had never felt more beautiful. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began, but Sarah was lost in David's eyes, remembering their first conversation at the farmer's market 3 years earlier. Their vows were personal and heartfelt. David promised to love all of Sarah, the actress, the daughter, the woman who still liked to buy her own groceries and grade papers with him on Sunday afternoons. Sarah promised to choose love over everything else every single day. Marcus Wellington learned about the wedding from page 6, like everyone else. He was in his office when Jennifer brought him the newspaper, her expression carefully neutral. "I thought you should see this," she said gently. The headline read, "Star's Secret Wedding. Sarah Mitchell marries Brooklyn teacher." The accompanying photo showed Sarah and David kissing under a canopy of autumn leaves, looking like they were the only two people in the world. Marcus stared at the image for a long time. Sarah looked genuinely, radiantly happy in a way he had never seen before. David's expression was one of pure adoration and wonder, as if he couldn't believe his good fortune. "Sir?" Jennifer asked quietly. "Are you all right?" For the first time in 4 years, Marcus answered honestly, "No. But I think I finally understand something." He looked at the photo again, seeing not the woman who had rejected him, but two people who had found something real and precious together. For just a moment, Marcus glimpsed what love actually looked like, not ownership or possession, but joy in someone else's happiness. "Cancel my appointments for today," Marcus said quietly. "I need to think." 3 years later, in the spring of 2025, Sarah and David welcomed twins, a daughter they named Catherine after Sarah's mother, and a son they named James after David's father. The children were healthy, beautiful, and filled their Brooklyn brownstone with laughter. Sarah had scaled back her acting career to focus on motherhood, choosing smaller projects that allowed her to stay close to home. She and David had created the kind of life she had always dreamed of, full of love, purpose, and genuine happiness. On the twins' 5th birthday in 2030, Sarah found herself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought her here. 39 years old now, she was graying slightly at the temples and had laugh lines around her eyes. She had never been more beautiful. "Mommy, tell us the story again," 5-year-old Catherine demanded as Sarah tucked the twins into bed. "About how you became a star." "Which part?" Sarah asked, settling into the chair between their beds. "The part about the mean man," James chimed in. "And how you showed him." Sarah smiled, remembering the little boy's fascination with stories of good triumphing over evil. "Well, once upon a time, someone was very cruel to Mommy. He tried to make her feel small and invisible. But you got strong," Catherine added excitedly. "I did get strong. But do you know what I learned?" Both children shook their heads, wide-eyed. "I learned that the best way to defeat cruelty isn't with more cruelty. It's by becoming so full of love and kindness that there's no room for anything else." "Is that why you married Daddy?" James asked. Sarah's heart melted. "Daddy helped me remember that love is always stronger than money. Kindness is more valuable than power. And the best kind of success is building a life filled with people who love you for who you really are." As she kissed her children goodnight, Sarah thought about Marcus Wellington. She had heard through mutual acquaintances that he had eventually sought therapy, had tried to become a better person. She hoped it was true. Everyone deserved the chance to grow. But she also knew that his cruelty, however painful at the time, had been the catalyst for the most important transformation of her life. Not just her rise to fame, but her journey to understanding her own worth. Sarah had learned that true success wasn't about being impossible to ignore. It was about being impossible to forget by the people who mattered. And the people who mattered were sleeping peacefully in the next room, dreaming of bedtime stories where love always won. In the end, the invisible waitress had become something far greater than a star. She had become herself, completely and unapologetically. And that had been worth everything. The transformation was complete, the reckoning was over, and love had triumphed absolutely.